This hearing will come to order. It's been 4 years since this subcommittee held a hearing on the role of small business advocates. Although we've spent a lot of effort strengthening these offices, during those 4 years, we've worked with the minority to create minimum requirements for each of the small business advocates. We've added clarity and precision to the roles of the Procurement Center Representatives, PCRs, and the Office of Small Business Disadvantage Business Utilization. Go ahead, what do you call that? Ostabus, thank you. We've worked to improve the data system upon which they rely and to give them new tools to assist small businesses competing for prime contracts and subcontracts. However, there is still much work to be done. Unfortunately, the regulations and standard operating procedures in place across government haven't kept pace with the Small Business Act or the reality of the federal contracting. What does this mean? First, job descriptions for the business opportunity specialists and commercial market representatives are woefully out of date. Second, PCRs are regularly prohibited from looking at many small consolidated contracts. Third, the OSDBUs aren't able to catch agency personnel evading the Small Business Act. Fourth, small contractors are losing opportunities to compete. Finally, it seems that we aren't explaining to the new contractors that winning an award is only the first hurdle. Next, you have to comply with the obscure, confusing compliance regulations. Today, we're here to learn from small businesses and those that work with them how we can ensure that small business advocates created by the Small Business Act can be more effective. I especially want to hear suggestions on what Congress can do to alleviate these burdens. I think it is appropriate that we periodically review the efficiency of these programs and make improvements so that the reality of the program remains true to the spirit of the Act. I think we have an opportunity to work on these issues in a bipartisan manner. As we've discussed numerous times this year, we know that we are losing small business contractors, and it will be difficult, if not impossible, to replace these sectors of our technological and industrial base. Supporting the advocates who support small business is a crucial element of small business success. I now yield to the ranking member for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is my pleasure to be filling in for Mr. Tarkay. Each year, the federal government spends approximately $440 billion on a variety of goods and services needed for its daily operation. And it has been the mission of this committee to ensure that small businesses receive their fair share of dollars generated by these contracting opportunities. As such, we have provided small businesses with tools to assist them in entering and competing in the federal marketplace as either prime contractors or subcontractors. While their effects were not immediate, these tools have slowly proven their effectiveness in getting results. Through small business goaling and set-aside programs, the dollars awarded to small businesses increased to $91 billion in 2014, accounting for 25% of contracting dollars. In fact, there were also increases in the awards to small businesses subgroups. For example, service-disabled veterans-owned businesses received $13 billion, and small disadvantaged businesses were awarded $34 billion. However, more work is needed to get all small businesses their fair share, as the government failed to meet its goal for women-owned small businesses and HUBs-owned businesses. Additionally, the mindset of contracting officials need to be changed so that they see these goals as floor rather than ceilings. It is to that end we must have strong small business advocates placed throughout the acquisition process. But the amount of resources dedicated to these officials would seem to indicate that the Small Business Administration places little importance in the role they play for small businesses. Procurement Center representatives are the first line of advocacy. These officials are tasked with overseeing contracts to determine if it should have been set aside for small businesses or whether it was improperly bundled. Despite their important function, there are only 49 of these advocates overseeing more than 15 million contracting actions. 49. So what I would like to say, Mr. Chairman, to the committee is the fact that sequestration and budgets have consequences. And so we are here to make sure that we provide a level playing field for small businesses to be able to access the marketplace, the federal marketplace. But in order for the staff and the SBA administration to do its job, they need resources. As a result of the short staffing, PCRs are no longer reviewing actions if there is any kind of set aside on the contracts. These officials are allowing the bare minimum small business representation, and that is just unacceptable. Commercial market representatives face similar staff shortages with only 27 advocates to monitor the subcontracting plans of large prime contractors. Their effectiveness is further diluted as many of them have other responsibility to perform, taking them away from the CMR role. The same can be said for business opportunity specialists, who are often pulled by their district offices to help with other small business programs rather than overseeing the AA participants as intended. Many of the problems with the CMR and BOS advocates are compounded by the fact that neither of these positions are laid out in the statute. Instead, they have been left to develop with SOPs and common practices. This begs one critical question. How can small businesses know what these advocates can do for them if their roles have not been clearly defined? With 100,000 fewer small business contractors registered to do business with the government than in 2012, and the average contract size increasing because of more bundling, it is more important than ever that actions are taken to reinforce the importance of small business advocates. I hope that today's hearing will help us gain some insight as to how we can strengthen the role these advocates play in not only assisting small businesses navigate the marketplace, but also ensuring these businesses receive their fair share of contracting dollars. I thank all the witnesses for being here today, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. If additional members have opening statements prepared, I ask that they submit them for the record. Thank you all for being here. In a moment, I'll introduce you individually, but so you understand the timing, you have 5 minutes. When it turns red, you have 1, but we want to hear what you have to say, so don't sweat the program too much. We have one panel today. Our first witness is Angela Stiles, Chair and Partner at Cromwell and Mourning. She is testifying on behalf of the Defense Industry Initiative on Business Ethics and Conduct, a nonprofit organization dedicated to a culture and practice of ethics and integrity in all business dealings with the Department of Defense. Our second witness is Davey Leghorn, the Assistant Director of the National Veterans Employment and Education Division at the American Legion. The Legion is the largest wartime veterans service organization. Thank you. Our third witness is Ms. M.L. McKay, CEO of Beacon Interactive Systems, a successful SBIR contractor. She is testifying on behalf of the National Defense Industrial Association. I now yield to the ranking member to introduce our last witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Tracy Ballas, the founder, president, and CEO of Federal Staffing Resources. FSR is a women and minority-owned business located in Annapolis, Maryland. With over 11 years of experience, the business also successfully graduated the SBA's AA Business Development Program and now serves as a mentor in the program. Ms. Ballas is also here testifying on behalf of the U.S. Pan-Asian American Chamber of Commerce, whose goal is to open doors for Asian Americans, minority businesses, and their business partners in corporate America and federal, state, and local governments. Welcome.
Thank you. Ms. Stiles?
Thank you very much, Chairman Hanna, Congresswoman Velasquez, and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today as the coordinator of the Defense Industry Initiative on Business Ethics and Conduct, or DII, to discuss ways to empower small businesses to comply with the many, many requirements of the federal marketplace. DII is a nonpartisan, nonprofit 501c3 association of U.S. defense companies who are committed to a culture and practice of ethics and integrity. In 1986, the chief executive officers and senior officials of 18 defense contractors, who were led by Jack Welch from General Electric, voluntarily met and created DII and drafted self-governance principles. Today, 76 defense contractors, including both small and large businesses, are signatories to the DII self-governance principles. As part of its mission, DII provides resources and assistance to help train hundreds of thousands of defense industry employees in ethics and compliance. Now, in an ideal world, all businesses that participate in the federal marketplace would have the wherewithal to understand and comply with all of the obligations that go hand in hand with federal contracting. Unfortunately, this is not an ideal world. The scope and complexity of the regulations faced by contractors challenge even the largest companies with robust ethics and compliance programs. With less resources, measured by both money and manpower, and less experience with government contracting, the hurdles faced by small businesses are monumental. As a result, the federal government is undoubtedly contracting with small businesses that do not know the full extent of the laws, regulations, or provisions required for federal contracting. Some are not monitoring their compliance with these requirements, and some have no process to voluntarily disclose violations to appropriate authorities. Although there are numerous federal agencies, centers, offices that work with small businesses engaged in federal contracting, DII has extensively searched. And when I say extensively, we've done web searches, we've made phone calls, we've had meetings with all different levels of government officials. But we have not found federal government resources that provide guidance to small businesses to aid in the adoption of codes of conduct or the establishment of broader compliance and ethics programs for small businesses. Because the federal resources for small businesses seem to be woefully lacking in the federal government, DII itself recently undertook several significant initiatives to provide ethics and compliance resources to small business contractors. In 2014, we published a model code of conduct for suppliers, and I've provided that as attachment C to the committee. We also have on our website a supplier toolkit that is available for small businesses and all businesses as well. But following the publication of both our supplier code of conduct and our toolkit, we were making our way around to different suspension and debarment officials at the Department of Defense, and they kept telling us it really wasn't enough, that they really wanted to see if the private sector could help with ethics and compliance programming for small businesses. One thing that they don't want to do is suspend or debar small businesses because they didn't have the resources or the ability to understand how to comply with the laws and the regulations. And as a result of those meetings, DII has committed to provide additional resources to small businesses that are federal contractors, both prime and subcontractors. To that end, at the specific request of the Army Suspension and Debarment Office, we actually put up a training for small businesses on our website, but that's just the first step. We have a webinar available. I've provided the slides of that webinar, but even you can get on and take a look at what we provided. But they told us how important it was to have some basic training about small business programs up and available. So we put together that training, we put it up on our website, but we really aren't stopping there. This spring, we're going to launch a very robust small business toolkit, which includes structure and organization of a compliance program, so materials so they can build their own compliance program. We're going to have specific codes of conduct, policies, and procedures for small businesses to be able to literally lift out of our website and use in their companies. We are making sample training videos for them to be able to train their employees on critical ethics and compliance issues in federal contracting. And we're also going to provide them with templates on how to monitor and audit your own compliance program. So we are very hopeful that these, along with a mentor protege program that we are putting together for lists of mentors that are available within DII to assist, take phone calls, answer questions from small businesses, we hope that this will actually help. But I will tell you that this can't just be the private sector alone. We really, while DII and many of the defense contractors are very committed to making resources available, we really want this effort, this education and training effort, to be done in coordination with the Department of Defense and with our Small Business Administration colleagues. It takes both the public and private sectors, I think, to ensure that small businesses have the resources and tools to wisely, legally, and ethically perform federal contracts. This concludes my prepared response, but I do want to thank one of my colleagues for assisting me with this testimony. She's here today, Olivia Lynch with my office. There are very few, aside from your counsel that you have here on the committee, there are very few people that actually understand small business statutes and regulations and how difficult this is. But I can tell you, Ms. Lynch, who helped me with the testimony, and certainly the counsel that you have on your committee are some of the leading experts around. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Leghorn?
Good morning, Chairman Hanna, Ranking Member Velasquez, and members of the subcommittee. On behalf of our National Commander, Dale Barnett, and 2.3 million members of the American Legion, we thank you for this opportunity to testify at this hearing. In the midst of obstacles for veteran entrepreneurs seeking federal contracts and the VA purchase card scandal, the American Legion recognized the need to empower the Small Business Administration and the offices of small and disadvantaged business utilization to hold the federal agencies accountable. Our government has a fiduciary responsibility to not circumvent the procurement process with questionable shortcuts. The American Legion can appreciate that VA misused purchase cards in fulfilling their duties to provide adequate care to veterans, but we are concerned that this deliberate undermining of the procurement process is putting our veterans at risk. This issue is paramount to the American Legion, as it directly affects the care of a vulnerable segment of the veterans population. Federal contracts protect veteran patients with terms and conditions and hold medical suppliers or healthcare administrators accountable. None of these protections are in place when equipment and services are acquired outside of the procurement process. So never mind that VA is likely being overcharged or that the abuse of purchase cards is unfair to small businesses. This is foremost a safety concern that needs to be addressed. The American Legion believes that VA contracting officials misuse purchase cards because of short staffing and bad training. We would like to believe that the perpetuated culture of foiling the procurement process is unintentional. With that in mind, there are measures that VA OSBU can implement to ensure that our veteran patients are safe and that all purchases that are set aside for small businesses remain reserved for small businesses. VA OSBU must train and retrain their contracting employees. VA should hire additional staff to write and oversee contracts in order to decrease the existing workload. VA must account for purchase card expenditures, and they must start recording it in a database like that of the FDPS. Another issue harmful to veterans small businesses is the Federal Strategic Sourcing Initiative. The American Legion has never thought that the FSSI was good for small business. While this initiative streamlines government procurements, it is flawed in that it drastically reduces competition for government spending. As we mentioned in our written testimony, with the latest generation of FSSI, the bidding process is burdensome and cost prohibitive to small businesses. Further, it is equally frustrating to sell to an agency despite having been identified as a small business prime under the FSSI. We've come to terms that this generation of FSSI is here to stay, so the American Legion would like to make a few recommendations to ensure that at least a few of our veteran small businesses can benefit. Procurement Center representatives are supposed to be our advocates. They ensure a fair portion of contracts and subcontracts are allocated to small business. Unfortunately, there are simply not enough PCRs to review every contract for compliance, and PCRs do not review outgoing FSSI delivery orders. The contracts under the FSSI are so large that the American Legion believes that it will be a benefit to the small business community if PCRs are required to review outgoing FSSI contracts. The American Legion goes a step further and recommends an SBA budget increase for the hiring of more PCRs. Over the years, procurement initiatives and tools like the FSSI reverse auctions and large IDIQ contracts were all partially aimed at alleviating the workload of contracting employees. A case can be made that these initiatives and tools are not working because contracting employees are still looking for shortcuts. There is a need for additional competent federal personnel to write, oversee, and monitor contracts because much of the frustrations our veteran entrepreneurs have stem from a lack of well-trained procurement staff. The American Legion does not believe that federal employees intentionally put veteran patients in danger or are maliciously suppressing the veteran small business industrial base with bad policy. They just need the requisite training and manpower to do the job correctly and be the advocates for small business that they were intended to be. In closing, the American Legion thanks this committee for the opportunity to testify today, and we look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you. Ms. McKay?
Good morning, Chairman Hanna, Ranking Member Velazquez, and members of the subcommittee. My name is M.L. Mackey, and I'm the CEO of Beacon Interactive Systems, a small business with offices located in Waltham, Massachusetts, and in Norfolk, Virginia. I'm also the Legislative Affairs and Policy Committee Chair for the Small Business Division of the National Defense Industrial Association, NDIA. With each of those roles, my motivation is the same: to utilize small business effectively to increase innovation, cost savings, and competition in the federal acquisition ecosystem. Chairman Hanna, Ranking Member Velazquez, I appreciate your leadership and the efforts of your subcommittee taking the form of your obvious interest in and commitment to leveling the playing field for small businesses to compete in the federal marketplace and the many pieces of legislation you have authored and passed to that end. My role at NDIA places me in regular discussions of small business legislation. The overwhelming response of my colleagues to your efforts and your committee's efforts is sincere appreciation, so please let me begin by saying thank you. As I said, this subcommittee has demonstrated a deep commitment to leveling the playing field for small business. This concept is important to today's discussion because if one accepts that small business has a lot to offer and that in many cases small business is where innovation occurs, what we are all fighting for makes sense, this level playing field. Your efforts make it possible for the best, not just the biggest, to rise to the top. The goal of your efforts is not to make it easy on small business, and it's not, but rather to ensure that we have a diverse industry that supplies the government with the very best goods and services possible at the best possible price. Unfortunately, the level playing field is as difficult to create as it is important to maintain for the well-being of the government contracting ecosystem. Fortunately for those of us that advocate for small business interests, we have strong advocates like this committee. Your efforts in the recent legislation regarding small business federal contracting in the fiscal year 2016 NDAA demonstrate once again that small business can depend on Congress to work for a fair and healthy acquisition system. Of course, new legislation is just the beginning of this process. Each one of your provisions must be written into clear regulations and policies that each agency can implement. Next, the Congress, the Small Business Administration, and each agency must oversee the implementation of these regulations and policies to be sure that they are followed. With that in mind, what I can offer today is some feedback from my experience with my own company, as well as some of my NDIA colleagues' experiences with their small businesses. I make 5 recommendations in my prepared testimony, but in the interest of time, I will read only 2 of them here today and submit the others for the record. The first problem I'll discuss with you today is the lack of PCR involvement in consolidated contracts. This limits small business participation. We suggest that PCRs should actively advise on consolidated contracts. Inviting PCRs to advise on the consolidated acquisition strategy will help better identify those requirements where small businesses can best perform and help structure the solicitation such that more small businesses can compete. Over the recent decade, the federal government has seen widespread and far-reaching changes in the way it procures services and technology. There's been significant growth of consolidated contracts. Although this has helped the government cope with the reduction in the acquisition workforce through fewer contracts, it tends to bundle requirements that are out of reach of most small businesses. For example, technology contracts are generally the result of consolidating multiple disciplines and requirements into a single solicitation for large business team competition. Empowering PCRs to advise on consolidated contracts will help to ensure that the requirements are within the reach of small business. The impact would be increased small business participation and competition, resulting in more cost-effective and innovative solutions for our warfighter. The second problem I will speak to is post-award compliance. The government has created barriers to entry into the federal market and thus is not getting all the companies participating that it would like to have. Many entrepreneurial small business owners do not want to deal with the compliance headache and risk of engaging with the federal government. To be clear, Beacon became a federal government contractor when, after 10 years of running a successful private sector software company and in the wake of the tech bubble burst, our market dried up. We engaged with the Navy's SBIR program to accomplish a pivot into the federal market. Once we got through the initial burden of understanding some of the federal contracting compliance issues, it has wound up being a net positive experience both for our company and our federal customers. But overcoming the barriers was really hard at first. Honestly, it still is at times. So I'd suggest we develop paths and provide resources for non-traditional entrepreneurial small businesses to drive the innovation, cost-effectiveness, and improved competition so desperately needed in federal procurement. The impact would be increased small business participation and improved quality across the board, not just in the high quality of what these entrepreneurial small businesses will directly provide, but also by the competition they will incite across the government supplier base. Mr. Chairman, on behalf of both the National Defense Industrial Association and myself, I hope that these suggestions will be useful in your ongoing work. I would like to thank you and the committee for your leadership, and I would be pleased to respond to any of your questions.
Thank you. Ms. Blaze?
Good morning, Chairman Hanna and Ranking Member Velasquez and the members of the subcommittee. Thank you for this opportunity to provide testimony regarding my personal experiences as a woman-owned small business owner who has graduated from the SBA 8A program, is now an approved SBA mentor. My name is Tracy Balaz. I am a founder, president, and chief executive officer of Federal Staffing Resources, also known as FSR. I am also a retired registered nurse. I am testifying today on behalf of FSR regarding the advocacy and support of small business representatives from the following departments that I have had experience: 8A Business Development Program, Business Opportunity Specialist, BOS, the Procurement Center Representatives, PCRs, and the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Small Business Utilization, OSTABU. As a member of the U.S. Pan-Asian American Chamber of Commerce, an organization whose mission is to be the gateway to corporate and government contracts while opening doors and making connections for the Asian American minority businesses and their partners, I am grateful for their recommendation that FSR should provide testimony today. Federal Staffing Resources is a successful business with 250 employees, in large part due to the programs, the guidance, and the support provided by the SBA. FSR has been a federal contractor since its inception in February 2004. Our core competency has been in the support of those who have sacrificed for our freedoms, the active duty men and women, and the veterans of the U.S. Armed Forces by providing the best-in-class healthcare personnel and program management expertise for the Department of Defense and the Veterans Health Administration. We strongly believe that the SBA has given FSR the opportunity to provide these services to the best of our ability by giving us the support we needed. The 8A program was crucial to our early survival in business. My experiences have been extremely positive, and FSR has benefited greatly from the 8A certification. It has been without challenges, however, since the compliance requirements of the 8A certified companies are rigorous. The government contracting process is complex and confusing. Most small businesses do not have the time or the money it takes to fully understand and how to succeed as a government contractor. The SBA provides essential guidance to business owners. One issue that I have encountered while I was working with the SBA is the interpretation and implementation of standardized policies and procedures. They are handed down from headquarters to the regional offices, the district offices, and finally to the individual SBA representatives. Even within the same office, but mostly across state lines and districts, interpretations of policies may differ. I have had conflicting experiences regarding how the SBA reviews its financial eligibility and size standards and how it applies this criteria to award or to deny contracts. Some guidances are misleading, conflicting, and misinterpreted, which can result in inappropriate action, such as improper awards. Increased training for the representatives, as well as inviting industry to offer their experiences, may help mitigate confusion and ensure uniform compliance. Noncompliance or the lack of attention to the rules may be potentially fatal for small businesses. Even from the beginning, I knew that the relevant statutes and regulations must be respected and never ignored. We take compliance very seriously, and so much so that FSR has a director of compliance. Since the 8A program is highly regimented, certified 8A contractors are under greater scrutiny for compliance than any other small businesses that do not have a certifying body mandating an annual update of their business or financials. FSR is a mentor in the 8A Mentor Protege program. It is part of our duty to educate our protege and make them aware of the pitfalls of noncompliance. The SBA helped us grow our business pipeline and our business network. The OSTABUs and the PCRs were essential in creating opportunities for the past decade. The OSTABUs work closely with the SBA and small businesses to ensure that we are aware of federal opportunities and that we are aware of the growing statutes and regulations. The two areas that the PCR may have a direct impact on small businesses is to make recommendations for small business set-asides and to review the subcontracting plans and goals of large businesses. The monitoring of the small business subcontracting plans may merit review. The concern is that large businesses are not being fully assessed for their compliance and the percentage of small business utilization as specified in their contract. I understand from speaking to several OSTABUs and PCRs that the large businesses are expected to meet their small business subcontracting goals. However, due to insufficient number of government personnel, they are unable to police all the plans. Therefore, these percentages are reported only by large businesses and without verification from the subcontractor small businesses. The government's receiving report from subcontracting revenue directly from small businesses may themselves verify this objective has been met. In closing, I'd like to acknowledge the SBA program and the personnel for assistance in helping me achieve business success. Chairman Hanna and Ranking Member Velasquez, members of the subcommittee, thank you very much for this opportunity. FSR appreciates our contribution and personal experiences may impact the way the SBA interacts with small businesses, monitor and educate to ensure more compliance. Thank you very much. I'm available for questions.
Thank you. There's a theme here, and that is that the SBA is shorthanded, which makes me wonder. They offered a buyout program last year to PCRs and CMRs, and 15 people retired. Ms. Stiles, could you give a couple things? How does DII develop training on issues like limitations on subcontracting when the SBA and the FAR haven't issued its own final rules? And could you give me some examples of the types of ethical issues that people are confronted that might not seem obvious?
The rules, as you know, are quite complicated. The statutes governing federal contracting and the regulations governing federal contracting are complicated even for the largest of defense contractors in our country. I can tell you what makes it even worse is when a new statute comes out and that the regulations aren't updated to reflect the new statute. So the regulations are incorporated into the contractor's contract. So you sign on the bottom line and it becomes part of your contract. So you have to comply with the regulation that says one thing for limitation on subcontracting, but then there's also a statute out there that you also must comply with that says something else on the limitation on subcontracting. And the best that we can advise our clients is that they have to figure out how to follow both.
And they may not be in the same document. I mean, they could be completely separate and maybe even unavailable at the time.
Are we really anticipating small businesses to read legislation statutes that pass? I mean, that's actually really hard. They rely on the contract, they rely on the federal acquisition regulations, and it's really hard for them to also expect them to go scour through the statutes to figure out what they're supposed to be doing in particular instances. So it's very, very difficult. But I will say, even some of the simplest issues are hard to understand. Federal contracting isn't commercial contracting. You can't take government employees out to lunch. You have to You have to follow the specific terms and conditions of your contract. You can't sell products that are made in China. There's things that are just really, really different that are easy to get tripped up on, and we see it every day. We see it every day with small businesses.
And so to anybody, what kind of implications does this have on bundling? Obviously, there's an incentive to do that. I had asked you what kind of ethical issues you might be confronted with that might not seem obvious, but you said you had maybe a couple of examples.
Well, even the simplest things like pricing, certified cost and pricing information, where products have to be manufactured that are supplied to the U.S. government, simple gifts and gratuity rules. I mean, there are like pages and pages of gift and gratuity rules, not just for federal employees, but also in terms of what would constitute what you can do with your suppliers as well. And so it's easy to get tripped up unwittingly by.
Would you say that
entities.
it's almost impossible to follow? That anybody can make a mistake and depends on who's watching when that mistake is made?
Yes, even the largest companies make mistakes, and they have a lot of resources to comply and to put ethics and compliance programs in place.
Anyone else want to speak on that?
I think it's easy to make a mistake. However, it is on the onus of the small business who is going to be working in the federal space to be updated on the regulations. This is required on the 8A certification. You have to make sure that you're complying to the terms of your contract, and therefore you as a business owner has to do some homework. You have to be aware of what's going on and what you can and cannot do while working in the federal space. So if the opportunity were there to be able to have our representatives to be able to support us and educate us and remind us that we have compliances to meet, I think that would help us instead of just allowing the small businesses to figure it out for themselves.
Thank you. Ms. Velazquez?
Thank you. Ms. Dial, one of the main factors in staying active in the marketplace is to remain compliant. Can you help me understand why is so little emphasis is put into that?
Well, I don't know why. I think a lot of the emphasis has been put on getting the contracts to the small businesses, which is great, right? We want our small businesses to get a good share of federal contracts. But I think the emphasis was put there to the exclusion of what happens once you get the contract, how
Right.
you perform, how you follow the laws and regulations.
And how is that DIE doesn't find any government source that provide guidance on small business compliance?
We were really surprised when we started looking and realized what a big problem it was starting to become, at least from what we were hearing from our government colleagues in terms of their concerns about whether the small business suppliers that they're relying on that provided good products and services didn't have a compliance program. And we're getting tripped up in different areas, and so that's why we started looking.
Thank you. Ms. Ballas, you noted in your testimony that you have a director of compliance. And this is not a step often taken by small businesses. Why do you choose to make this investment, and what kind of assistance did you seek when creating your program?
So I chose to make this investment because we wanted to be 100% compliant. We did not want to risk being disbarred or suspended. The 8A certification is precious. You work hard to get it, you work hard to maintain it. And although there are many companies that feel that they will not get caught, it is a risk that you take if you are not compliant. So we chose to be able to assign someone in our organization to be a director of compliance. She is self-taught. She has years of government experience and has had a great deal of resources that she has obtained through classes or seminars provided by the SBA, other agencies, et cetera. But it really keeps our feet to the fire to be able to make sure that if we are going to be working and competing in the government space, that we're going to do exactly what the government tells us to do.
Would something like the tools that Ms. Style mentioned, discussed, would have been helpful to you?
Absolutely. If we had those resources at hand, we certainly would not have had to go and find them and seek them out. We did not get the assistance from the SBA. When we got our 8A certification, it was just an understood thing that we would be compliant, although there was nothing that we were given in terms of a handbook on how to do it. What is the FAR? How do we read the FAR? So your toolkit would be absolutely great for any business, but essentially those that are going into the federal space.
It is great that now you provide assistance to your compliance assistant to your prodigy. Did you find that other entities provide that is lacking in terms of providing counseling to small businesses?
I believe so. I think it is really focused on getting contracts, networking, who you meet, who are the buyers, who are the acquisition teams. It is not really focused on after award and what is expected of the small business or the large business.
Ms. Dial, thank you, Ms. Ballas. Other than money and manpower, what have you found to be the biggest obstacle in creating a compliance program?
It's the culture of the company. And so it has everything to do with the people who are leading the company. It actually, they have to embrace it and they have to understand it and they want to do it just like Ms. Balaz over here. I mean, that's exactly what you want. You want a company that says, if I'm taking federal dollars and I'm performing a service for it, I'm going to do it right.
Okay. And do you have an estimate on how much a basic compliance program will cost?
It's not inexpensive. So you have to have a person at least, partially committed to it. I would say at least $100,000 to put the very, very basics in place.
Okay. I have other questions for the other two witnesses on my second round. I will do it. No, because we have other members here. No, she just left.
You want to do it now?
Okay, yes. Mr. Lockhart, when earlier this year, we held a hearing about alleged fraud and abuse of government purchase cards at the Department of Veterans Affairs. You spoke at that hearing, but yet veterans group have yet to testify before the committee on this issue. So can you discuss further how this type of fraud have affected the veteran small business community?
Thank you for your question, ma'am. So the way it affects veteran-owned small businesses is that, first of all, the small business goaling percentages that are reported by VA OSBU are taken from data from FDPS. So since purchase card expenditures are not reported in FDPS, what the percentage that they actually report to the SBA is false. And we don't think this is something that's completely just only relegated to VA. We think other agencies have violated the purchase card rules as well. So overall, I mean, it could be that more than one agency is reporting false small business percentages to the SBA, and the SBA doesn't really have any teeth to go after the agencies when discrepancies are found.
So how can we get acquisition officials to stop trying to shortcut the contracting process?
I think the best thing we could do is to leverage the OSBUs within all the agencies and rely on them to really train their contracting employees to use regular procurement vehicles, or if things need to be expedited, to use maybe their sole source authority. But most importantly, they have to start reporting their purchase card expenditures.
Thank you. Ms. Mackey, the committee often hears from small businesses that they do not know the role of certain advocates or know how to properly utilize them as resources. In some cases, they do not even know this advocate exists. What can be done to clarify these roles and ensure that small businesses know they are a tool to be used?
So I will tell you that when I first found out about PCRs, I thought, oh, wow, what a great role. And I was really excited to have them get engaged in some of the contracting discussions we were having. And then I realized how few there were and how stretched thin they were and how they didn't know the particulars specifically of the SBI or contracting that we were doing. So it was like this promise that just went passing by. I'm very encouraged that we're talking about increasing those resources. I also would suggest that you reach out through the industry associations. What keeps striking me about the answers that I hear from my fellow panelists is this ability to initiate or do training. You talked about, Ms. Dells, you talked about changing it from the top down. I think if you really want to change behavior, or you want to have this kind of compliance, you need a continuous maintenance of your operational procedures and how you act. And so many of us as small business owners find our education in our industry associations. So I would recommend to you that you reach out through the industry associations.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly?
Yes, Mr. Leghorn, first I want to thank you for your service in the American Legion, and obviously before that, as a member of the American Legion, that's very important to me. You note that the procurement center representative PCRs are supposed to be the small businesses advocates, ensuring a fair proportion of purchases, contracts, and subcontracts are allocated to small businesses. Can you explain why the SBA would have a regulation that keeps its procurement center representatives from reviewing some of the largest contracting opportunities for small businesses? By this, I mean contracts awarded as part of the FSSI and other consolidated multiple award contracts.
Thank you for your question, sir. So the PCRs only look at contracts that are above a certain dollar amount, and because there simply aren't enough of them to look at every outgoing contract. And with some of the contracts that go out, or the orders that go out under the FSSI, they already have a small business component built into them. So for example, if you have seven primes that are designated, 3 of them could be small businesses and 4 of them could be large businesses, and they're not obligated to look at them because, you know, small businesses are already built in.
And Ms. Mackey, you're welcome to comment as well.
I'm not sure that I could comment too much more than that, except to add in that it's really important to articulate and discreetly break up the kind of work that needs to be done and make sure that we keep all the opportunities open. I really appreciate what you had to say on that.
And Mr. Leghorn, you know, from your view, there are not enough PCR or PCRs to keep up with the expedient review of every contract for compliance. In an ever increasingly difficult budget environment, outside of hiring additional PCRs, are there other steps that could be taken to modernize or create effectiveness within the PCR role?
Sir, I think a really good start, if we're not going to hire any more PCRs, is to just have PCRs start looking at FSSI contracts, because those contracts that are going out are so large, and, you know, there are actually very few small businesses attached to these contracts. If I'm pretty sure if any competent PCR looks at them, they could find other small businesses to break out contracts for.
And is there any other member of the panel that would like to comment on that?
Would it be okay if I added something to that? When I think about the PCRs reviewing the consolidated contracts, the thing I think I can offer is a perspective of what the small business owner experiences. Perhaps we both can offer that. But if you think about how long it takes to prepare, if you can qualify to propose on one of those, some of our colleagues have told us that it takes, you know, half a man-year to write one of those proposals. So if you have a small business that's 20 people, and they're writing one of these proposals where they might get work and they might not, that's half a year. That's 5% of my workforce. Let's say I'm a 20-person company. Often, just for perspective, the profit, the fee that I can charge on a contract is 5 or 6%. So it becomes unreasonable to think, even when there are these kinds of contracts that small businesses can go after, that most of your small businesses won't. So I think I'm again emphasizing your points, but I did want to put that context.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. And it's worth noting, Mr. Kelly will be introducing a bill to ensure PCRs can review consolidated contracts. This bill was written with the ranking member staff. So, Ms. Stiles, how unusual is it that a company would have what Ms. Balaz has? I mean, clearly you've reached a critical mass to do what you've done. But is it unusual?
Very unusual for a company that size or a small business to have a chief compliance officer or a head of compliance.
And makes a big difference,
Huge difference.
and but extremely rare.
Very rare because it's a person and you have to pay,
It's expensive.
Yes.
So that only emphasizes, again, what you do, the importance of what you do, and the importance of PCRs in general. Well, amazing. How much of an impetus do you think this has towards moving towards bundling and more consolidation, and hence, as Ms. Mackey said, the difficulties associated with getting contracts in general? Would anybody like to comment? I mean, we've seen a loss of 100,000 businesses, right? That's pretty severe.
If I may, bundling creates a situation where the cost of the value of all the contracts are so large that small businesses generally are not able to support that volume. However, I have heard through speaking with some OSTABUs and understanding through small businesses that there could be a tiered system in which, when you look at the NAICS codes for small businesses, the largest NAICS code size standard currently is 38 million. That's a 3-year average, and anybody who is within that could be considered a small business, but that is a hospital standard NAICS code. That's for those who are in healthcare. This is a NAICS code that we bid under. And then I believe the largest NAICS code for research and development is 500 person. And so, we're at 250, but we're still a small business, and as we continue, we will outgrow that NAICS code, but could still be a small business depending on the types of personnel we support. And then I believe the largest NAICS code for temporary services is 27.5 million, and then IT services is like 25 million. So if there were an opportunity to look at these contracts that are coming out as a bundled contract, to be able to say, okay, if there are small businesses in the mid-tier area that maybe are above these NAICS codes, that they can come together possibly and be able to work on some of these contracts that it was offered to them, because right now it's either full and open, the billion-dollar contract companies, or small. And if you don't have enough smalls that can say that they can do it along with their teaming partners, it will always go full and open for these bundled contracts.
That makes good. You agree with that?
Yes, I definitely agree with that. I would say, just on the bundling piece, I'm seeing some recognition at the Department of Defense that, at least on the compliance side, it doesn't really solve the problem, because the small businesses, if you bundle, many of these small businesses end up being in the supply chain, right? And so whether they're a prime and bidding, or whether they're in the supply chain, we have to fix these problems with compliance. And so I do think that, at least in some sense, there is a recognition at the Department of Defense that it isn't the solution that maybe they thought it was. Not that it doesn't make their life easier, right, to bundle things and just have one company to deal
One
with.
tends to think of the bundling from the top down, but what Ms. Balaz is suggesting is from the bottom up, which is different than, frankly, I'd thought about it before. Ms. Fillet?
Another question, Ms. Ballas. In your testimony, you discussed the lack of standardization of SBA policies that could lead to inappropriate actions on the part of small businesses. So I would like to hear from your own experience. Do small businesses usually rely on the business opportunity specialists to steer them in the right direction?
The business opportunity specialists, ma'am, are really assigned to those certified companies that are in the 8A program. So that they are very specialized in supporting those 8A contractors. I have two examples of misinterpretation of some of the statutes and some of the policies. It comes down to the financial eligibility of small businesses on sole source. This is just an experience that I've had, and in talking with my contemporaries, that they may not have realized the same experience. But when a sole source opportunity is approved and granted to an 8A company, the contracting officer must double check with the BOS to make sure that that company is viable, that they're eligible, and that they are able to support. There is a financial aspect of that where they will ask the 8A company to have present their tax returns to make sure that they're within the size standards to receive that sole source award. And usually it's based on the tax returns. Unfortunately, from my experience, and this is where I'm saying the interpretation is different amongst the BOSs. My BOS was extremely dedicated to her job, but she was extremely by the book, and so I'm not sure if this particular rationale what is part of policy, but she asked for interim financials, a moment in time of what my financials are today before I can provide my, be awarded a sole source. If we're a growing company, that is ever changing, and hopefully it is growing. It is not based on the tax returns and of the previous year. And therefore, I've been denied sole source contracts because we've reached a threshold during that growth period. And other SBA BOSs have not asked for interim. It's a surprise to them that we would be asked for interim financials.
So let me ask you, do you see the fact that there is a lack of direct BOS oversight from headquarters a contributing factor to the lack of standardization, for example?
I don't believe that's 100% true. I think it's just understanding the statutes and the policies and the rules and how they interpret them and express it to their 8A organizations. I think that what's there is written into, is a statute, and they just may be misrepresenting in the way they're explaining that to an organization. And I'm seeing that it happens within the same organization, same office, as well as across state lines where other businesses are. And as a mentor, I'm working with a BOS that's in another state. My protege is in another state, and therefore, some of the things that they have said to us is a little bit different than the instructions that I had and the guidance I had received as a 8A certified company.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Implicit in that is there's some arbitrary and capricious opportunities because of the complexity, and the lady that you talked to who wanted you to do interim financials, that's a lot of work and a lot of expense, and you thought it was not required, or you had no choice.
I had no choice.
Right,
I had to provide. The one other aspect, if I may, is audited financials. The 8A requires a company who's over $10 million and is a certified 8A to have audited financials. Audited financials are extremely expensive, and that is mandatory for you to sustain your 8A certification. Most small businesses do not have that requirement to have audited financials, but it is important to make sure that that company is sustainable. But I have spoken with 8A companies that have never been requested to have audited financials. And in the entire 9 years of my term in the 8A program, it cost me about $30,000 a year to have audited financials. And then I'm working against other organizations who don't have audited financials.
Yeah, and if someone says to you, you need it as of yesterday, then basically the 30,000 you spent for year end or doesn't even help you.
Correct. And it was not an issue that we had to provide the audited financials because we are compliant. We do what we are told. And there was no issue with that, although I found it rather expensive. But it was the fact that it wasn't standardized across all the BOS offices.
Thank you very much. Those FSSI contracts displace 500-plus small businesses in exchange for a handful of small businesses. In one case, we went from 1,000 small businesses regularly competing to only 30. This is something that the PCRs should review. So I want to, if there are no further questions, I want to thank everybody for being here today and with your ideas for solving some of these problems and potential solutions. It seems that some common sense reforms to PCR, OBDBUS, BOS, and CMR programs would go a long way to helping our small businesses compete. I look forward to working with my colleagues, and there are a number of ideas on this committee, along with, we've heard one from Mr. Kelly. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, I want to thank you all again. This hearing is now adjourned. Okay, boss?
What's that?
Are you okay, boss?
I'm okay.
Oh, I thank you, Mr. Kelly.